Hello and welcome back to the Pokemon 2020 Bochum Regional Championships, and we are now onto our top 8 bracket.
Yes, we are. We are getting very, very close now to the final stages of the competition. Only 2 more stages to go before we'll be crowning our champion, our regional championship winner of this tournament. We've had so many rounds so far. These players have made it finally to the top 8. And we're going to be jumping into it in just a moment. But before we do, we're going to have a quick look at who's made it. Still got it all to play for.
Yeah, and as we were seeing, Florian van Hooydonk was able to advance over Calvin Foster, who was the number 1 seed going into this Top Cup bracket. And yeah, able to advance over him into this top 8. And he's going to be facing Francois, who we did see on yesterday with that rain team with the 4 water types, loving to use that surf move as well. And we also have Alex Soto from Spain, who was able to advance over Roberto Parente, and he'll be facing David Kutesh, who we saw win on stream just a moment earlier.
Yeah, absolutely commanding fashion and a fantastic game to cast and show to all of you players there at home. But speaking of the Spanish, we've got another Spanish player in Guillermo Castilla, I'll correct myself, playing off against Jonathan Marston from the UK. So this is the match that we're going to be streaming in top 8 and showing all of you guys at home. The players are nearly ready and set up, ready to go. So we'll be jumping over to that in just a moment. But before we do that, we have in our last top 8 match, Eduardo Cunha versus Emre Sahan of Portugal and Germany. So rounding off our top 8 there, we're going to be going now over to the players to have a look at what they're going to be running and what they've done in previous tournaments.
Yeah, and we saw Jonathan on stream yesterday, not too successful in that match, but able to still make it into this top 16 bracket and then advance into the top 8. So Guillermo is someone we haven't seen on stream yet, though.
No, not for a long time. And we were talking to Guillermo before he's come up on stage. And actually, the last time that he was on stream was way back when in 2012 in the World Championships, playing against another Spanish competitor, Abel Sanz, in their top 8 match. So no stranger, as you can see there, to getting to the highest level of competition, both 2011 and 2012 national championship placings, and there you are, the the 7th place finish in the 2012 World Championships. Also coming back though to 2019, a little bit of a break in the middle, and being the Sheffield Regional semi-finalist, so top 4 position there. And it's really great to see a player like this have such a break in the middle, and then come back and start playing again at that top level. And now we're seeing him again in the top 4.
Yeah, it's really nice to be able to see someone who was really experienced going back all the way back to 2011 and 12 and still being able to be successful in 2019 and even this 2020 season. But his opponent here, we're going to have Jonathan Marston from the UK, and also having a very successful season so far. He was able to win a regional back in the Sun Series back in 2019 season, and he also came a runner-up in the most recent special event that we had over in Paris as well. And like we did feature him on stream yesterday, and we saw some really cool picks in that Hippowdon and that Lapras as well.
Yeah, it's something that I'm hoping to see. I wasn't able to watch that game yesterday with Jonathan, so looking forward to that Hippowdon doing a lot of work here, hopefully. Really excited to see that, but also the Lapras, which is something that I don't think I've ever seen really in competitive play before.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have access to its Gigantamax form yet, so he's just going to be running a regular old Lapras that can only go for a Dynamax. But we are now going to be jumping into the team preview, so Guillermo is going to be running that Arcanine, Wash Rotom, Togekiss, Ferrothorn, Sableye, and Mudsdale. And Jonathan is going to be running Excadrill, Hippowdon, Dragapult, Indeedee Female, Lapras, and Chandelure.
Yeah, so we've got two different styles of team here. We've got Jonathan potentially got some Trick Room shenanigans going on with that Chandelure. Lapras not known to be the fastest Pokemon out there. You've got a little bit of a combination there, though, with Excadrill and Hippowdon. Hippowdon known for setting up that Sandstream, making that Excadrill go first. And we know from previous games in the stream and a little bit of time in this format that Excadrill's Dynamax form is one to watch out for. Guillermo on the other side going for a slightly different strategy, maybe opting to use that Mudsdale to really good effect alongside Sableye. I know there's been a little bit of swagger shenanigans going on, so maybe that Mudsdale with its own tempo ability going to play a big part in this game, and certainly not something that Excadrill wants to be facing down.
Yeah, and like we saw yesterday, Jonathan didn't have the most inventive trainer card, but also it seems like Guillermo, also not on that trainer card game, really want to be focusing on the battle instead of the trainer cards, unfortunately.
No, wanting to stand out by not standing out.
Exactly. So we're going to be seeing that Lapras and Dragapult coming out from Jonathan's side against the Mudsdale and Ferrothorn on Guillermo's side.
So immediately we have Ferrothorn putting lots of pressure on that Lapras. We don't know the set of the Dragapult. Sometimes they run fire moves, so that Ferrothorn is going to have to worry about a potential fire move coming out from that Dragapult. And certainly something that Guillermo is, either if he doesn't know already, if he hasn't seen any of Jonathan's games, is going to have to need to maybe preserve that for later in the game. Mudsdale, of course, has to worry about that Lapras being on the field. Powerful water-type moves coming out, and especially if Jonathan opts to go for something like a Dynamax on his Lapras, could be under threat. And speaking of Dynamax, that's exactly what we see coming out here from one of these players, but since we've had no customization, I'm not sure which one it is.
Well, it is going to be that Lapras, like you said, wanting to go for potentially those Max Geysers and those Max Hailstorms. And we'll have to see if Guillermo's going to be matching that Lapras with a Dynamax of his own this turn. And yes, he is. He's going to be Dynamaxing just to match Jonathan here. So we're going to have to see what he's going to be Dynamaxing, whether it's going to be that Mudsdale or that Ferrothorn. And it is going to end up being that Mudsdale. Yeah,
Mudsdale, a personal favourite of ours on that we've been waiting to see until now, but not quite seen yet. So really good to see that Mudsdale come out. Maybe some big Max Quakes coming.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We're going to see a Ferrothorn go for a Protect instead, though, so not wanting to take any moves coming out from the Lapras, or that Dragapult, which does indeed carry a fire move in that Flamethrower, so not going to be hitting that Ferrothorn thanks to that Protect, and a Max Hailstorm being fired off by that Lapras into the Mudsdale, not doing too much damage, even though it is a super effective hit, and yeah, it's going to set up that Hail thanks to the Max Hailstorm, and activate the stamina on the Mudsdale, so no own tempo or inner focus on this Mudsdale. Going to be raising the defenses instead, and also going to be raising its special defense thanks to that Max Quake that is going to be firing off into that Dragapult, doing a lot of damage, and going to be raising the special defense of that Mudsdale and also that Ferrothorn as well.
Yeah, and certainly putting a timer on that Dragapult there. I mean, you have the hail being set up by that Max Hailstorm, and that, as we see here, is doing a little bit of chip damage to all of these Pokemon. Ferrothorn not going to worry too much with its leftovers recovery, but certainly Dragapult, now down to 16 hit points, is going to have a hard time staying on the field for a long time. So, again, something that Jonathan's going to have to worry about now that Guillermo knows that that's where one of the fire moves are, and that's where what he's got to protect his Ferrothorn for. Both Mudsdale and Ferrothorn known for being able to last to the end of a game, certainly Ferrothorn, and you need those fire moves to really deal with it effectively.
Yeah, you've got to really hit it with those fire moves, or potentially those fighting moves as well. We don't see any fighting Pokemon coming out from Jonathan's side, so he does really need to rely on those fire moves to take out the Ferrothorn, but not going to be relying on this Dragapult this turn, as he's going to be switching out into the Hippowdon. So we're going to be seeing the Hippowdon on the stream, and thanks to its Sandstream, it's going to immediately get rid of the Hail that the Lapras set up last turn and replace it with the Sand. And the Ferrothorn, not wanting to take that potential Flamethrower from the Dragapult, is going to be switching out into the Arcanine, and is going to intimidate both the Lapras and the Hippowdon here. So a nice switch in that would have been able to take the Flamethrower very comfortably thanks to that fire typing. And it's going to be a Max Geyser here, going to be super effective against either of Guillermo's Pokemon, and the Max Geyser is going to be hitting into that Mudsdale, and thanks to that Max Quake special defense, this is still really not doing too much damage at all.
Yeah, we're seeing exactly why Mudsdale is good at what it does. That stamina boost, raising its defense that you see there, in combination with the Max Quake coming out here, raising its special defense, makes it so hard to take down.
Yeah, it's going to be increased two stages of increased defense and 2 stages of increased special defense here, thanks to the stamina and the max quake boost as well, and doing quite a nice bit of damage to that Hippowdon. And I'm very curious to see what this Hippowdon is going to be doing.
Yeah, well, it's certainly going to be putting pressure on the Arcanine here. Obviously, the Arcanine switched out after the Hippowdon came in, so definitely a good turn there for Guillermo, making sure that Intimidate got off onto the Hippowdon as it switched in, but not wanting to stay on the field, wanting to come straight out.
It wants to keep that Intimidate in the back to switch in again in the future, and going to be replacing itself with that Wash Rotom. And Lapras is going to be firing off one more Max Geyser into that Mudsdale, and it's been hit with 3 super effective Max moves and is still surviving this turn, activating another stamina boost on the Mudsdale, increasing its defense even further. But speaking of increasing defense, Hippowdon is going to be going for a stockpile here. Going to be stockpiling 1 stage and increasing its defense and special defense by 1 stage as well. And Mudsdale is going to be firing off 1 more Max Quake into the Lapras here. Going to be doing a little bit of damage here, but also raising its special defense as well. So we're getting 2 ground types boosting both of their defenses here.
We are, exactly. And you see a completely different game to some of the ones that we saw in previous rounds yesterday. Lots of defensive actions going on there, lots of bulky Pokemon out on the field. So these Dynamax Pokemon have got to the end of their Dynamax forms, going back to their normal state. But both of them still on the field. Lapras took almost no damage from that Mudsdale, so you're seeing really the effective Dynamax coming out. But it looks like Jonathan has got the upper hand here at the moment. That Rotom Wash coming in from Guillermo is going to pressure both the Lapras and the Hippowdon. But because the Hippowdon's starting to raise its defenses, Guillermo's going to have to make sure that he keeps the pressure on and doesn't let that Hippowdon set up too far.
Oh, it's not going to be setting up even more this turn. It's going to sacrifice those stockpile boosts immediately and switch out into Jonathan's final Pokemon here, which is that Indeedee, and is going to be setting up the Psychic Surge. And I believe, like we saw on stream yesterday, it is going to be carrying that Psychic Seed, so is going to be increasing its special defense by 1 stage immediately as soon as it hits the field. And Mudsdale, even though it had so many increased stages of increased defense and special defense, is also going to be sacrificing them, switching into the Ferrothorn here, as Rotom goes for a Hydro Pump, and the Indeedee does dodge that Hydro Pump, and a Freeze Dry going to be coming out into the Rotom, going to be hitting that Water type super effectively.
Yeah, one of the things that Lapras is known to be able to do, Freeze Dry is a move that hits Water-type Pokemon for super effective damage, so being able to, instead of doing very little damage to that Rotom with an Ice-type move, actually doing quite a lot of damage, turning it super effective. Really good play there from both players, making sure their Pokemon are surviving to the next turn.
We'll have to see if this Lapras is able to survive this Thunderbolt coming out from the Rotom, and it is indeed able to survive, and that looks like the Lapras is holding that weakness policy that so many Pokemon like to carry. And Indeedee is going to be recovering all the HP that the Rotom has just inflicted onto this Lapras with a Heal Pulse, so recovering 50% of its HP here, as Lapras is going to fire back with another Freeze Dry, and thanks to the weakness policy boost, is now able to pick up the KO on that Rotom Wash, and Ferrothorn is going to be firing back with a Power Whip. It does connect into this Lapras and does a lot of damage, putting it very low.
Yeah, really impressed at the way that Jonathan has trained his Lapras there. 2 really strong attacks coming in from Rotom and from Ferrothorn. Power Whip is a really, really strong attack, and certainly Ferrothorn is not a stranger to doing damage, so well trained there by Lapras on Jonathan's side of the field, managing to hang on. Unfortunately, though, for Jonathan, Arcanine has just come onto the field and likely going to be faster than Indeedee and Lapras. So Jonathan's going to have to decide whether he wants to follow away any attacks from Lapras, make sure it stays on the field, and it can use that weakness policy boost that it has to make sure that it's doing as much damage as possible.
Well, Arcanine's not deciding to do any damage this turn, as it is going to protect from this Psychic that was fired off by the Indeedee into that Protect, as well as the Hydro Pump into the Arcanine. So very strong Protect here coming out from Guillermo, as a Power Whip does connect once again with that Lapras and is enough to pick up the KO.
Yeah, not wanting to sacrifice the Arcanine there, realizing that he may need later in the game to switch in that Intimidate and keep it there for later in the game. We have seen that the Hippowdon's taken quite a lot of damage, and of course it switched out and doesn't have those boosts that it had before. So this Arcanine may be able to finish the job, so to speak, a bit later in the game. Dragapult coming in for Jonathan's going to start to put a bit of pressure on again, but Dragapult does have to make sure that it does land that flamethrower onto the Ferrothorn here.
It's not going to be landing it this turn, as Ferrothorn is going to be protecting itself from that potential flamethrower from the Dragapult, but instead going for a Draco Meteor and missing the Arcanine. A very crucial dodge there from the Arcanine, as it is now able to fire off a Snarl onto both the Indeedee and the Dragapult, and is enough to pick up the KO on the Dragapult. So a really heartbreaking miss from that Draco Meteor onto the Arcanine, and Indeedee is going to be going for that Psychic into the Arcanine, getting a little bit of revenge for the Draco Meteor miss with a critical hit, but is not enough to pick up the KO.
No, not enough to pick up the KO at all. So Hippowdon coming in here for Jonathan, setting up that sand stream again, bringing the sand onto the field. Going to be now probably an uphill battle for Jonathan to come back into this game now that he's lost the only source of fire coverage that he likely has onto the team, unless this Indeedee is carrying something like Mystical Fire as well that we don't know about. Hasn't been revealed as yet, so Arcanine here just going straight for a Protect.
Yeah, probably scared of those potential ground moves coming out from the Hippowdon, but that's allowed Indeedee to fire off this Heal Pulse into the Hippowdon, so we're going to be recovering it back to full HP, and the Hippowdon is going to be going for a stockpile, so not attacking the Arcanine this turn, so no attacks into the Protect of that Arcanine. We're going to have to see what this Ferrothorn is going to be going for. It's going to be going for that Leech Seed, and it is going to connect with the Hippowdon, so it's going to be slowly chipping away at its HP here.
And certainly recovering a lot of HP back. Hippowdon is known as a Pokemon that has... It's quite healthy, let's say, has quite a lot of HP, and so the amount of health that Ferrothorn is going to be healing back every turn is going to be quite substantial, and Jonathan has to worry about that, because if Jonathan only has a way to chip away at this Ferrothorn, he's going to have to do it through that Leech Seed recovery.
Yeah, well, Arcanine here is going to be switching out back into that Mudsdale that's at such low HP, it will be knocked out to any attack that Jonathan wants to go for, but not attacking this turn with the Indeedee, going for a Protect instead, and a high horsepower is going to be coming out from the Hippowdon, going to be connecting with that Mudsdale, and is enough to pick up the KO there. So Guillermo's now back down to his last two Pokemon, and a Power Whip going to be connecting into that Indeedee Protect, so not attacking the Hippowdon this turn.
No, and probably wanting to remove that Heal Pulse from the field. That Indeedee has done quite a lot of work this game to make sure Jonathan's Pokemon are as healthy as they can be. But also, really good play there from Guillermo, making sure that Arcanine has come out and come back in, setting up that Intimidate again, making sure Hippowdon on Jonathan's side of the field is just not doing as much damage as it could.
Yeah, and we've seen that high horsepower was the choice of move as the ground move on the Hippowdon. Nothing like an Earthquake, so he doesn't have to worry about Earthquaking his own Indeedee here, so he can fire off those Heal Pulses very freely. But Arcanine here is going to be protecting and allowing another Heal Pulse to go into that Hippowdon, so it is once again going to be recovered back to full HP, and going to see another stockpile. So once again, Jonathan not attacking that protecting Arcanine, so going to be increasing its special defense and defense as well by 2 stages now, with stockpiling to the second stage, as Power Whip is going to connect with the Indeedee, trying to get rid of that Heal Pulse, but not doing enough damage for the KO here.
No, not quite enough, and we see that really what we're looking at is the battle of the win conditions here. Both players have identified what Pokemon they really want to protect. From Jonathan's side, that's that Hippowdon. He's stockpiling it up, making sure that Guillermo can't remove it from the field. Equally, Guillermo is taking that Ferrothorn, getting the Leech Seed up onto the field, trying to pressure Jonathan's team with that Arcanine as well.
Yeah, so Indeedee is going to be redirecting all of the moves from Guillermo with that Follow Me here, and that move is a Will-O-Wisp, so going to be landing into the Indeedee and it's going to be burning it as well, so it's going to be chipping away at its HP with that burn and the Sandstorm that is still on the field. And
Ooh.
Body Press is going to be coming out into the Arcanine, not caring about those Intimidates, because it's going to be coming off its defense stat, which is increased with those stockpiles. And Gyro Ball is going to be the move of choice into the Indeedee, going to be knocking out. And now we're down to this Hippowdon versus Ferrothorn endgame, but Hippowdon does have a very strong way to hit that Ferrothorn.
Yeah, we thought that Flamethrower was the only way for Jonathan to remove Ferrothorn from the field. Turns out that Body Press is another option that Jonathan has up his sleeve. And certainly as we go towards the end of the match where the timer is running down, we saw on the screen there only 2 minutes remaining. We'll see how much this Body Press does to Ferrothorn and if it's enough to pick up the KO. Not quite, leaving it on a little bit of health, but it looks like a next body press is going to be able to do the business here.
Well, will Power Whip be able to do the business here? It
Oh!
will be able to, as it's going to get a critical hit and is going to completely ignore the defense boost that the Hippowdon had set up with the stockpile. And yeah, that's going to be game one for Guillermo.
Yeah, we had nearly 15 minutes of both of these players getting to that end game, wanting to set up. Jonathan correctly identifying that Hippowdon with stockpile and body press was able to dispatch that Ferrothorn absolutely perfectly, except for one thing, and that one thing was the critical hit that we saw.
Yeah, stockpile, you want to try and play quite a slow game. You want to set up the stockpiles, and you want to be able to not let the opponent be able to knock yourself out. And when you play that game, if you're playing the long game, that means more and more attacks are going to be going into that Pokemon, and you'll get eventually get a critical hit.
Exactly. So in this case, it went down to Casti, and Casti did exactly what he should have done, right? Always play for your outs. And at the start of the game, that was to make sure that that Leech Seed was in play, make sure that Ferrothorn was recovering as much health as it could, and especially in a position where Hippowdon and Indeedee weren't able to switch out. They were the last two Pokemon. You can't reset that Leech Seed at that point. But also cycling those Intimidates round and making sure that the Arcanine was coming out to the field and back in to make sure that Hippowdon wasn't doing anything. But Body Press ignores those Intimidates. So, yeah, a really varied play there from both players, but really well played on both sides.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting that we saw two ground types wanting to really boost their defenses. The Mudsdale with the stamina and the Max Quakes, and the Powdon with those stockpiles as well. So both players going for quite a similar strategy with completely different Pokemon and completely different styles of setting themselves up as well.
Exactly. But now we are in team preview going into game two. Jamie, what do you think that Jonathan and Casti can do differently here?
I think I might quite like to see that Sableye. It's got some quite nice shenanigans that it can go for. A lot of supportive movesets that may be able to put a stop to the Hippowdon from being from setting up. We have seen that the Dragapult had access to that flamethrower, so now Jonathan won't be able to try and catch Guillermo off guard with that flamethrower anymore, so the Ferrothorn will be able to play around a bit more of the Dragapult, and he also knows about the body press of the Hippowdon, so keeping the Ferrothorn a bit safer, not allowing the Hippowdon to be able to set up those stockpiles may be beneficial for Guillermo going into this game too.
Certainly, and we've seen Sableye in previous formats go for things like Will-O-Wisp. We've seen it go for Foul Play, which can be quite effective, especially on that Dragapult on Jonathan's side of the field. So, yeah, maybe something really good for Casti to try here. But it looks like we are going to see the stock trainer cards coming out here. We're going into game two. Actually, looks like both players have different hats.
Yeah, and they also have different games. Guillermo has Sword, and Jonathan ends up having Shield as well. So there are slight differences, but there is also a difference in the lead here from this Hippowdon and Excadrill coming out from Jonathan, and also a change-up from Guillermo. He is still going to be leading with that Mudsdale, but leading this time with the Wash Rotom.
Not something that Excadrill ever wants to see when it comes out onto the field. We didn't see Mold Breaker coming out from Excadrill, so likely to be Sand Rush in combination with Sandstream coming out from Hippowdon here. So not going to be able to hit that Rotom with any super effective damage, as it looks like, if I remember the hats correctly, it's going to be Jonathan here going for a Dynamax.
Yeah, so we'll have to see if it's going to be that Excadrill that we see so often Dynamax, and yes, it is going to be that Excadrill going for that Dynamax, so potentially going for those Max Quakes to take the Hydro Pumps coming out from the Rotom a bit better, or the Max Steel Spikes to take the ground moves coming out from the Mudsdale, but also another turn one Dynamax from Guillermo as well, and we'll have to see if this is going to be that Rotom to try and go for some Max Geysers to reset the sand, or it's in fact going to be that Mudsdale.
Yeah, Mudsdale coming out onto the field into its Dynamax form, and it's certainly going to be pressuring that Excadrill on Jonathan's side of the field, so we'll see if he's able to cope with those Max Quakes.
Well, he's deciding to fire off his own Max Quake instead with the Excadrill into the Mudsdale, and going to be doing not too much damage at all, and of course going to be activating the stamina once again on the Mudsdale. So going to be increasing the special defenses of the Excadrill and the Hippowdon, but also going to be increasing the defense of the Mudsdale by one stage also. And Hydro Pump from Rotom is once again not going to connect with this Hippowdon, as it is going to be going for a stockpile, increasing its defenses by one stage and its special defense by one stage. And Mudsdale is going to be firing off that Max Quake And going into the Excadrill, going to be doing super effective damage and doing a lot more damage than Excadrill's Max Quake did to itself.
Yeah, so we're seeing the special defense raise for Mudsdale and Rotom here onto the field, and a little bit of Sandstorm damage going to be going to Rotom only, everything else on the field immune to that. Quite interesting to see the tactic here from Jonathan coming out, knowing that that Excadrill isn't the best Pokemon to have on the field as it goes for a Max Steel Spike, but looks like he's trying to set up that Hippowdon.
Yeah, going to be increasing its special defense before with the Max Quake, and now the defense as well with the Max Steel Spike, so increasing the defense of the Excadrill and that Hippowdon by one stage again. Also activating the stamina once again on that Mudsdale, increasing its defense by another stage, and Hydro Pump this time is going to connect with that Hippowdon, and we'll have to see how much damage it's going to be doing with those increased special defense boosts, and not much damage at all to the Hippowdon as it's going to set up a second stockpile, increasing its defenses even further. So I believe that this Hippowdon will be at 3 stages of increased defense and special defense, as Mudsdale is going to be firing off another Max Quake here, going to be raising the special defenses even further, but not into the Excadrill for the KO, instead into the Hippowdon for really not much damage at all.
No, and this is going to be quite significant going into the next turns. What we'd expect is that maybe Excadrill was going to go down, wasn't able to get off its third Dynamax move and its last Dynamax move, but instead Guillermo going into the Hippowdon, making sure he's trying to chip it down, do a little bit of damage, so maybe he's able to cope with it later in the game. But Excadrill does have the opportunity to go for yet another max move, increase that Hippowdon's defenses or special defense by one more stage, as well as the last stockpile that's able to come out from this Hippowdon. And of course, seeing the body press there coming out from Hippowdon, if Jonathan's deciding to go for that Max Steel Spike, that brings the Hippowdon to 5 stages of increased defense, and that's for body press very significant and going to be doing a lot of damage.
We are going to be seeing another Max Steel Spike, increasing the defenses even further of the Excadrill and the Hippowdon, and doing a little bit more damage to the Mudsdale, so going to be increasing the defenses once again of both the Excadrill and the Hippowdon, but also the Mudsdale again with that stamina. So are we going to see another Hydro Pump come out from this Rotom? We are. Is it going to connect? Yes, into the Hippowdon once again, but its special defenses have been increased even further, but for that Hippowdon, 2 games in a row, it's just been critical hit right through those defense boosts, and it has been knocked out by that Hydro Pump now. Max Quake is going to fire off from the Mudsdale into the Excadrill, and is also going to pick up the knockout.
It is, and that's heartbreaking for Jonathan there. This is the way that these kind of teams go. If you want to have your Pokemon on the field with all of their defense boosts, that's great. If your opponent doesn't land a critical hit on you, and of course, the longer you're on the field, the more attacks go into you, the more likely it is that you're going to see a critical hit there. So, a little bit of a double-edged sword there. When it works, and most of the time it does work, really, really difficult to deal with for your opponent. But sometimes, and in this case, in both this game and in Game 1, we see the critical hit come out there and finish off the Hippowdon.
We have to see if Jonathan can rely on that Indeedee and Dragapult as his last 2 Pokemon to take this game and take it to a Game 3. We're going to see the Psychic Seed once again on the Indeedee, going to be increasing its special defenses by 1 stage, so the Rotom won't be doing as much damage to this Indeedee, and still having access to the redirection as well, so maybe the Dragapult can take this game for Jonathan.
It may be able to. Indeedee's not going to take too much damage from Rotom there. If Dragapult is able to launch some big attacks into Mudsdale, maybe get a critical hit of his own, he may be able to come back into the game.
We'll have to see how big this Shadow Ball is into the Mudsdale. Not very big at all. Not doing much damage to the Mudsdale, and increasing its stamina once again as Thunderbolt is going to be fired off into this Indeedee, thanks to that special defense boost from the Psychic Seed, not doing too much damage at all. Psychic going to be fired off into this Mudsdale by the Indeedee, and still not too much damage coming out from all these Pokemon's attacks here. Going to be increasing this Mudsdale's defense even further, increasing the damage of its own body press into this Indeedee. There's not quite enough to pick up the KO on the Indeedee, but there is still that Sandstorm, and we'll have to see if the Indeedee is able to survive. No, the Sandstorm is enough to pick up the knockout on the Indeedee, and now Jonathan is just left with his Dragapult.
Yeah, it's a lot of work for a Dragapult to do, and especially against 4 Pokemon on Guillermo's side of the field. We'll see how they want to play the last turn, but actually Jonathan's decided that, no, not going to be able to get through this. Give the game to Casti. let him go into top 4 and say, you know what, I know when I'm beat.
Yeah, and Jonathan's strategy, it did seem like a very strong one. It didn't seem like he had the best way through the Hippowdon.
Yeah.
And having, like, it wasn't so much relying on the critical hits with the Hydro Pump, he was just going for those attacks, and it just happened to get it in the end. But yeah, the Hippowdon would have been able to have so much defenses. It does have access to that slack off to be able to recover its own HP, and would have been in such a strong position. Really difficult for Guillermo to be able to knock out. But yeah, 2 critical hits in 2 games, and the Hippowdon strategy just gone.
It just falls apart, and unfortunately that's the case. And to be fair, one of the only ways that it does fall apart, you saw the way that Jonathan piloted that, making sure that in both games he got in game 1 he got all of his stockpiles that it was available. You can only stockpile 3 times before the move fails. So he got all of them in game 1, managed to get most of them in game 2, and was only stopped by a critical hit. We saw those Hydro Pumps not doing too much damage, even though they were super effective. And of course, using the Excadrill in game 2 in order to help that setup was brilliant to see. Just a shame that it didn't pay off for him.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful strategy. It seemed like there wasn't really a way through, but the critical hits deciding otherwise there. But Guillermo still was playing very well. He was able to get his Ferrothorn into that position to be able to be going for those Power Whips into the Hippowdon. And then in game 2, he was able to knock out both the Excadrill and the Hippowdon on the same turn to bring Jonathan down to the last 2 Pokemon in that Indeedee and Dragapult, which didn't seem to have enough firepower to break through.
No, and you know, those Ferrothorns are so difficult, especially, you know, you have to be targeting one thing with a Shadow Ball, another thing with a Flamethrower, and, you know, you can't do that, unfortunately, in VGC. So, but the other thing that I really do want to touch on here is both players opting for that body press strategy. Setting up, having Pokemon that set up their defenses, Mudsdale with that stamina boost, Hippowdon with that stockpile boost and the max steel spikes from its partner, and then using those defense boosts to be able to take hits, but also really dish out some damage.
Yeah, it's a really cool strategy, and it's also really cool to see it executed in 2 entirely different ways.
Yeah.
With the Mudsdale with its unique stamina ability, increasing its defenses, and then the stockpiles and the max steel spikes coming out from the Excadrills. We also saw in round 1, we saw that Bronzong going for the Dynamaxes. Also max steel spiking itself to be able to body press. So it's a really cool strategy that we've seen quite a few players use here, and it seems to be working out, especially if they made it into the top 8 here. But the Mudsdale seemed to be the better body presser.
It does seem to be the better body presser indeed. We're going to go to a short break now, but we will be back very soon with your winner from this round, Guillermo Castilla.
Hello and welcome back to the Pokemon 2020 Bochum Regional Championships, and I'm here with your top 8 winner with Guillermo Castilla. How are you feeling?
I feel really good. Well, it is my second top 4 in a regional in this season. Fairly, I was top 4 in Sheffield, then now I'm top 4, and it's amazing. Fairly because I'm an old player. I have been playing Pokemon for the last 12 years. I have won many championships, but for the last years I have been retired for this, and I think it's amazing to be again here and again to battle and to have the skill to be able to win or to try to defeat the top players such as Jonathan or Oliver Sculling, and many players that I have played in the last months, and I feel in the same level than them.
Okay, so we saw the Hippowdon putting on a lot of pressure with the stockpiles.
Yes.
And we did see the way to break through the stockpiles ended up being those critical hits. Were you aware of the stockpile on the Hippowdon before?
Yes, of course. Well, it's the first time I see a Hippowdon in VGC and VGC 20, and well, it's an amazing strategy to increase your defenses with stockpile and then attack with body press. I have to say, and I think it was unfair for me and for my opponent. I have to say that I have many luck in this battle. I think that it was unrespectable with my opponent, and I think that I had luck. The first one, he told me that he had a slack off in Hippodon. My idea was to stall time because there was only 40 seconds, and I tried to protect with Ferrothorn, stall with lead seat, and win by time. But if he had a slack off, the battle was for him. The second one, I think that if I would hit, if I had hit the Hydro Pump, probably I didn't need the critical hit, because with slack off and Dina Ground that increased your special defense, the second Hydro Pump, the first I missed the first, and the second one I hit it. It was around 40% of his life, and I think that if the first one had hit, the second one had destroyed the opposing opponents, and then I will have the battle in a good way for me. But the most important is that I had the critical hit, and I don't like to win with this kind of luck, because this means that I don't have enough level to defeat my opponent by my own. But sometimes I had during the Swiss rounds, I think that more bad luck than good luck. In the top 16, I was being hacked, and I could win anyways. I know that sometimes hacks it for you, sometimes it for the other, but I don't like to win with these kinds of secondary effects.
That is sometimes part of the game. There are the critical hits that can sometimes swing these games in your favor, and it just happened to fall in your favor this time.
If we don't want to play a game that has luck, that influence of luck, we could play Tetris, for example, or not.
Yeah, but we play Pokemon, the game we love, and sometimes we have to accept that there are some kind of RNG elements in the game. So you'll be moving on to the top 4, so good luck for that game, and we will be back shortly with the first semi-final, so stay tuned.